Hey everybody, welcome back. I know it's been a little while since I've put up a post for Project Jolene. I've been kind of working on some other things along with working with Jolene. But really quick, this is Baby Blue. This is a 2003 Acura CL Type S that I am helping a neighbor to kind of go through and fix different things. And the car sat for 8 years without even being started. And so far, I've got the car running really well. But I'm going through and replacing gaskets and dry rotted parts, suspension. But I'm doing a whole series of videos on that as a separate project. But let's get back to Project Jolene. So today, what I'm going to explain is I'm going to first show you what I'll be using today, but we're going to disassemble a piston, reassemble a piston, clean it, prep it, put the bearings in, fit the rings to make sure that the rings are within tolerance. We'll show you how to do that. And then we're going to put in the crank position sensor, and also going to show you the different things that I'm using for it. And on the one thing that I almost finished up, but I wanted to kind of go in depth with, are the main bearing, which are these parts right here, the main bearing side bolts. And I've already installed all the other side bolts with the exception of this one, because I want to kind of go over the process. This bolt will be installed exactly the same as all the others. And if we remember in the previous videos, I actually painted the bolts so that it would stick with the color of the engine. Now, without further ado, let's get started on today's video. So this is the actual bolt that goes into the main cap. Notice that there is a red sealant on the bolt. A lot of the factory manuals and everything say that this is good enough to get the vehicle to seal, but I like to put a little extra on it just to make sure. And what I use is the Ultra Blue gasket maker. It's multi-purpose. Gonna have to clean it out. It's got a lot of leftover gunk in it. And I don't know if anyone has a trick. Leave me a comment and let me know. I've tried sealing this, plugging it, and for some reason it always dries and leaves a mess in the applicator. That's why it's coming out the bottom. Huh. Now, after I put my gasket sealant on the bolt, I'm going to insert it and just hand tighten it. I am getting this stuff everywhere. Take a second to clean this off. I think what happened is because I squeezed it too hard, I punctured the bottom of the tube. Alright, that's all we're going to need of this for now. Clean my tools. I'm going to need my torque wrench. Those side main bearing caps go in at 18 foot-pounds. And that's going to be the same for all of them. I'm just going to set this aside because we're going to need this for later. Alright, so the next step we're going to move on to is, one thing I forgot is I forgot to kind of mention what was on my table. So I'm going to use a drill, and I'll show you what that's for. This is the actual crank position sensor. It's a new sensor. And this is the crank position sensor mount bolt. Coffee filters, I always like to use those for cleaning. Some chain cleaner degreaser. It's a really, this is something that I had in the garage that I've used in the past. And I want to use it because it's like brake clean. But this is just, it's really expensive and I just don't want it to sit there. I'm going to use the hammer, but I'm only going to use the wooden handle part. This Dremel, just in case there's any anything on the engine that's hard to get off. I'm going to use this breaker bar to turn the crank to ensure that the piston is moving correctly. Assembly lube, 5W20 motor oil just to lube things. This is the set of piston rings. Here is the connecting rod bearings. A feeler gauge to measure the distance of the piston rings. The new piston head. That I'm replacing the old one with. A pair of needle nose to remove and install the pins, ring pliers, a ring compressor, and this is my socket. I use this dental tool to move my oil rings around, and I'll kind of go through that. And then for the install of the pistons, I actually upgraded to the ARPs, the 134-6006. It is for the connecting rods. And you torque those to 40 foot-pounds. So like in the factory manual, it tells you to tighten the connecting rods to a certain foot-pounds, and then you use what's called angle. But these, you just do 40, and it's a one-stop and go. And also, I'm going to be replacing, this is the original oil diverter plug. And notice that the factory replacement is made out of plastic or some sort of composite. I'm going to replace it with a billet aluminum. It's more reliable, it's stronger, but also it has a part where you can screw in a bolt to remove it, which is a really nice feature that the factory replacements don't. So we already know that I'm going to put the billet aluminum in there. So this one is going in the trash, and we'll see what we can do with that one. All right, so to get started, let's put some gloves on. And the first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to disassemble the piston. So notice the way that this piston has not been disassembled. This is out of the original engine. But some things I want to point out. The piston orientation, if you notice, the factory head has a dot. The dot always faces the front of the engine. And then you go to the position of the connecting rod. Notice that there's a small dimple. Again, this is a Gen 3, 2004 Gen 3 LS. This dot faces the rear of the engine. And notice too that the actual connecting rods, they are broken. They're cast, and then they're called cracked, which means that you really can't. You can put them on backwards, but it's if you pay close attention, you should not see a seam here. And I also noticed that this side has both of the numbers. This is the original connecting rod bolts that I'm going to replace these with the ARPs. And I'm going to do inspections. And then another thing to notice too is that the connecting rod moves inside the piston, and this is what's called a floating design. So let's go ahead and remove the connecting rod base, and I'll show you how to replace the screws or the mounting bolts. So with a factory, these bolts are put in by a small steel washer. What you do is with a drill in reverse, you go ahead and remove the screws all the way out. Do this on both sides. Then you flip it over and just insert the screw back down in there and gently tap it out. And if you notice, when you tap it out, there is the steel retainer or aluminum. I'm really not sure what the material is. And then now we're going to do this side. It doesn't take a lot of force or pressure to do it. Well, there we go. So now we're going to be ready for the new ARP connecting bolts. These, because they were previously installed, really don't have another use, so I'm gonna go ahead and just throw them away. I don't want to reuse them. Okay, so one thing that I need to do, I just want to make sure that while I have my drill, I'm going to go ahead and clean the bolt journals. This is where the brake clean comes in handy. We'll do it again. Now I kind of want to use the toothbrush, make sure to get the debris out of there, clean where the bearing goes. Looks pretty good to me. Now, we're going to move to the disassembly of the piston. Again, I want to point out, dimple towards the rear of the engine, dot towards the front. So, when you go to install it, this being the front of the engine, the piston will be in this position. Now, with the new piston head, it doesn't have a dot, but if you'll notice, there is an arrow here. That arrow acts just as the dot does. Okay, first thing you want to do is remove your retaining pins. These can be a little difficult, but I usually just take a pair of needle nose, put them in, and it just pops right out. And I can tell you that that went a lot easier than the previous ones. There we go. There's the fight I was looking for. Maybe it helps to push the pin in a little. Big time. Okay, so now we've removed the old floating pin retainers. Don't need those anymore either. Now I'm going to try to push this pin out, which it moves really good. If it doesn't, then you might have issues. Now, this we're going to replace with the piston because it's new. So I'm kind of inspecting it to look at the wear, and it doesn't look too bad, but we're not going to need that again. And then the piston just comes off. Now, because we're replacing the pistons, a lot of the videos and stuff that I've seen, you can easily clean this piston and reuse it if you wanted to. But because I had it broke down and the engine has over 100,000 miles on it, I wanted to go ahead and put new piston heads so that I wouldn't have any issues. And the reason that the pistons are different colors is because this piston is, and it's hyper, I really don't know how to say it, hyperetic or something like that, but I'll put it in the video of the type of piston that it is. But it's kind of it's a stronger piston as a factory replacement. Another thing too is, if you notice the grind marks in this piston, that's when they were weighing the pistons. I bought these pistons from Engine Tech, and these pistons are weighted. They are, all of them are the same exact weight, and they're matched. So that's really good when it comes to balancing your engine. So again, we don't even need this anymore. But an example I'll show you really quick. Let's put a little brake cleaner on it, and notice how fast and easy the piston cleans. Very, very nice. Okay, so now that we have our piston disassembled, before I reassemble the piston, I want to check my rings to make sure they're in tolerance. So we have the new retaining clips, and new rings. Now, if you notice, there's a bunch of different rings in here, but I'll explain what goes where. So this is your bottom oil ring. You're going to have a ring, then the oiling ring, and then the top oil retaining ring. That goes in the very bottom slot of the piston. Now, another thing to notice too is then you have a second ring and a top ring. Now, if you look at these two rings, you can see this ring is a lot thicker. So what I want to do is look at my piston, and I see that this groove sticks further out than that groove, which means that the thicker one goes in the middle. Now, one thing about some of these rings, if you notice, it says top right here. That means that the ring faces up. And the reason that it faces up, if you look very closely at the tip of my thumbnail, there's a little curvature in the ring. Okay, that ring has to go in like this. If, which this is our top ring, if the ring does not have any markings, then it can go either way. So one thing I'm going to do really quick before I measure it with the filler gauge is I'm just going to kind of wipe it off to make sure that it's clean before I go to putting it in my bore that I've already honed and cleaned. Now, we know that this is the top ring. So what I want to do is I want to measure what's called ring clearance before I put the piston in. And one thing that's really cool is I've already installed the other 7 pistons. So this procedure that I am showing you is the exact same for all 7. I'm just going to kind of wipe out the bore a little bit. Now, what I want to do, and there's several videos out there that explain how to gap, this is called gapping your piston rings, about how to gap your rings for boost, if you're going to add nitrous oxide or turbocharge it. I'm not going to turbocharge or nitrous boost this engine right now. That's not in my plans. If it changes later, then I'll go back and do this. But right now, I just want to meet within factory specifications. Check it out in the video, but I'm pretty sure that it's 14 thousandths of an inch minimum with 20 thousandths of an inch maximum. So as long as I'm between 14 and 20, which I have recorded my measurements on my checklist that I made, as long as I'm within 14 to 20 on the rings, then I'm happy with it. Now, a trick I like to do, and there's a reason why we waited to put the piston together. Because this piston, I'm just going to look at it and make sure that it's clean. I'm going to use this piston as a tool. Notice that I'm not taking the floating pin out. I like it because that's the orientation that the pin should be right now. I don't know if that matters, but I just want to make sure. So I'm going to use this as a tool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my first ring into the cylinder. And then I'm going to take my piston and push it down. Again, making sure that the arrow is forward. I'm going to push it down about 2 inches and then pull it back out. This gives me a very accurate measurement as far as my piston ring gap. I'm going to get a flashlight to see if I can show you the gap a little bit better. So, once that the piston is down in the bore, the piston ring, I apologize, you see the gap right here. That's what I want to measure. Remember, it can't be any more than 20 thousandths or no less than 14 to allow the piston to properly oil. So let's go ahead and start with 14. Definitely 14 fits very nicely. Let's jump up. Let's go up to let's go up to 19. Let's see if 19 fits. Now remember, we're still under 20. 19 fits great. There's a little bit of drag, and that's what we're wanting. Okay, so I'm gonna say that it's 19 thousandths. And just to double check, let's go ahead and try to fit 20 in. Okay, here's the big old 20. Let's see. Ooh, 20 fits, but it won't go all the way to the piston wall. Let's try 21. It'll fit, but it won't go all the way. Yep. 21 kind of binds up a little. So we're going to call this one at 21. I know I said 19, but I want to call it at 21. And I'm going to put the factory specs in right now on the screen. So once that you finish that, you take your ring out. Then you're going to check the other rings the same exact way. And what's important again is that you put this ring with the word top up. Go ahead and go to 20. Is too big. Let's go to 19. $19 fits good. So 19 on the second ring. So we have a 21, 19. Let's check our oil rings. They're all within specification. Now I think I might have had those specs wrote down. All right, so now the next step I want is, we know that our rings are good. Now I want to rebuild, but before I rebuild the piston, I want to just double check, make sure that everything looks good and clean. Maybe a little brake clean in there. So one of the confusing parts that when I was researching the actual bearing, the connecting rod orientation, so a lot of the information on YouTube It's saying that a Gen 3, kind of the pistons are a little different, but anyway, when the cracked rod is in proper orientation, this is what it looks like. If it's not, there's a couple of indicators. If you notice, the bearing alignment notches are on the same side. That lets you know that you're in the proper position. And also, when you get the connecting rod assembled, this area right here is the bigger side. It's flatter. This goes to the front of the engine, and notice that this side is smaller. This goes towards the rear of the engine. Again, there's our orientation dimple. I call it that. It's not officially that, but it's there for a reason. But that helps me make sure that I maintain the orientation. So now we've got that clean. What I want to do is I want to double check, and I want to clean my new piston. And being that the piston is new, most likely it's clean as it is. This is just a little insurance. Notice that I slide the floating pin out that direction, but keep it the same way. All right, so again, the arrow goes to the front of the engine, which would put my piston, if this is the back, it would put my piston in my connecting rod just like that. So again, if this is the back and this is the front of the piston, I'm just going to rotate it a little bit, flip it back over. This is the way my connecting rod goes into the piston. So what I'm going to do now is, first of all, I'm going to change gloves because I want to make sure that my hands are clean for this next step. Gotta let them dry. So I'm going to take a little bit of my assembly lube and put it in to the piston. And remember, I'm keeping it in the same orientation. Put a little bit on my connecting rod. Get rid of that. Okay, so remember, I know I keep saying this, and the reason I say it's because I made a couple of mistakes trying to orient the other pistons, and it was a headache. So again, front of the piston is there, rear of the connecting rod is there. So I slide this in, and it should slide in freely. Very nice. Okay, so now we do our pin installation. So I push one side down. I generally like the pin with the opening towards the seal side. I don't think it matters, but if it does, this is just the way. Again, very first video, it may not be the best way, but it's my way.